Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is a group of podcasters bringing you daily draft podcasts and is home to the only dynamic mock draft simulator which allows fans to mock draft against other fans. The Draft Professor simulator features a first-round challenge, 5 unique one-round drafts. The Draft Professor Simulator features a second-round challenge, 10 unique two-round drafts. All mock drafts are always picking against the fans and draft analysts which use the simulator. Every mock, every pick, every time. The Draft Professor also features ranked players functionality, where you can rank your favorite players at every position. Optionally, you can add tiers to your rankings to show what round you have the players graded in. The Draft Professor also features Draft a Team functionality, which allows users to snake draft a team of 22 players to demonstrate your my guys, compare player strengths, and discuss draft prospects in a way no other mock draft simulator can. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Well, welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I am joined by Josh and Randall with a special appearance on Monday night. Jake is at birthing classes, so that is why he is not here for the next 3 Mondays. So, Randall, thank you for filling in.
You got it. How we doing today?
We're doing pretty good. Josh, it's good to see you.
Yeah, good to be back for another Monday. And draft season is in full effect, guys. The NFL season just ended. We all saw what happened last night. That can go on a whole different podcast, just going over that game in general. But great game by the Eagles, but draft season is fully here now. So we're not just talking about first round guys anymore. We're talking about second round, third round, day 3 guys that you need to know. Really filling out the top 254 to get all the information to you guys right from the source from all the podcasters here at the Draft Professor. So make sure to follow Randall, make sure to follow Jim, everybody over at the Draft Professor. We're going to be having live podcasts every day throughout the next couple months.
Yeah, so this is our second podcast of the night. So Cole just broke down 32 skill players for 32 teams. So that was actually very interesting with a lot of feedback from Bill and Owen in the chat. So that was actually, for somebody that had the flu, Cole put pretty good. But we're going to kind of dive into, here's what we expect to happen at the scouting combine. And as your boards exist now, who are some players that maybe they're where they are on the board because of traits, but maybe the film doesn't justify the player being as high, but you like the traits, so you're leaving them high. And I think one of the first players that met that criteria when we were brainstorming was Deone Walker from Kentucky. So, like, Josh, if you had to compare Walker's traits to his tape, like, is it a tale of two stories, or how would you describe that?
Deone Walker is a very interesting prospect evaluation to go over, right? Summer scouting before this season, you go over to the defensive lineman, you see this guy 6'7", 340 pounds, plays taller than that, plays longer than that, really long wingspan, and is honestly a force at the line of scrimmage. And he can do some really unique things. He can tackle well in the first and second level. He's pretty agile for his height. He brings alignment versatility. He can line up as a wide 9 technique at sometimes at the University of Kentucky. And for somebody that's 340 pounds, defensive coordinators that like to move their defensive linemen around absolutely love Walker. But because of his height, he plays at a high pad level. He's not really effective at the point of attack at the line of scrimmage. So it's really interesting with a guy that stature and that big to have deficiencies at the line of scrimmage. So the scouting combine might not match up what the tape tells you with Deone Walker, but trust me, when teams see him in person, we saw him at the Senior Bowl, absolute monster of a human being. If he goes out there and tests really well in the speed aspects, the three cone, the whole 9 yards. If he puts up a really good showing at the bench, teams are going to be willing to take over some of that chance with Deontay Walker just because of the size he brings alone. I mean, if you're not a fully fulfilled prospect, but you're standing at that stature, some NFL team is going to take a chance on you, get there under their coaching staff, and see if they can develop you. So Deontay Walker has a lot to gain, in my opinion, at the scouting combine. A guy who was expected to be a top 32 prospect all season long hasn't really fit that. Let's see if he can get himself back in the top 50-ish area. But with the heights and measurables, that's a guy absolutely that can at the scouting combine.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you kind of almost look at it, and if you get into that, like Buffalo has a pick 62 or things along those lines, that fringe second round, all GM's got to be sitting there looking like, let's just take them. Take a flyer on them, see if it works or everything. But you're right, that point of attack at the line of scrimmage is kind of what stood out the most. I mean, in 2024, if he loses that high pad level and he loses leverage, he kind of just stops and he stands there and then just doesn't do much after that. I'm curious, and I don't know, Josh or Jim, if you saw anything on what weight he was playing in 2023, and I wonder if there was a difference in weight because he looked a lot more. He looked quicker, agile. Statistics showed it, sort of thing. He was chasing down running backs in the backfield, things like that in 2023. So I'm curious if maybe he was playing a little bit lighter, a little bit quicker in 2023 versus 2024, and if teams are looking at that to get down his weight to 330 or something along those lines to get that agility back. Because in 2023, he ended up having 51 pressures, 8 sacks, and 4 quarterback hits versus 2024, where it was only 22 pressures, 4 sacks, and 0 quarterback hits. So when it comes down to that, like, how do we get him back to 2023? And I do think that you're right. At that combine, if he runs that insane 40, that gets those defensive tackles more intriguing on their speed and agility, then you can do it. I believe Tavondre Sweat did it last year, right? Had a great 40, then eyes opened up, tried to match it with the tape, and, he's doing well for the Titans and stuff like that. So I agree. I think he has a great opportunity to get back in that top 50 from what he was in the summer scouting. And I kind of think, I hope he does, because that size is, just incredible for that line, especially watching the game yesterday.
So, Josh, where's Walker on your board right now?
So Walker right now is my defensive lineman 11th. He's just outside the top 10. Now it can interchange. He's right there with Aeneas Peoples and Shamar Turner for me in that category or range. So he'll be sitting inside the top 100 for me on the lower half of the round 3 side. But at the at the combine again, he's able to prove that he was the 2023 version of Deontay Walker. His ceiling is up there with Kenneth Grant's as one of the most unlimited ceilings for a defensive lineman who's not already established themselves so far this year.
And Randall, where do you have Walker?
I had him defensive tackle number 9, and I had him in the mid-3rd round. So I just a little bit higher than Josh.
Okay.
And it's the traits, straight up.
Yep.
So, and in the 32 GM mocks that we're doing, he tends to go after pick 50.
Yeah.
Right. So it's either the last part of round 2 or sometime in round 3. That's so.
Yeah.
I think where you guys have him seems to be about where most people have him.
I feel like consensus is a little bit higher at the moment. And I think maybe since now the NFL season is over, people will start kind of putting it back to where me and Josh have him, matching the tape other than just his size.
I also think there's just been many defensive linemen in the back half of this year that's elevated their stock so much that we didn't expect. Darius Alexander from Toledo, for example, Alfred Collins, the leap he took this year. Shamar Turner didn't really have the year we expected, but he's still up there as a really tradesy prospect. Aeneas Peoples had a great Senior Bowl. So there's a lot of guys. There's also guys I still haven't mentioned: Savion Jones, Riley Mills, Oman Norman Lott, in that top 100 area. Even Josh Farmer, if you want to talk about traits for the position. If you want to talk about a defensive lineman that has a lot to gain from the scouting combine, Josh Farmer, the defensive lineman from Florida State, we saw him at the Senior Bowl as well. Didn't really have the production to match up his 2023 year, but a guy who is going to absolutely test in the high percentiles for anything that the defensive linemen do in the couple days that they're there. So keep an eye on Josh Farmer as well.
So where do you have Farmer on your board now?
So Farmer is outside of my top 100. I have a little bit harsher on his grade just because of the effort and run defense for me. But it's weird. This is a guy that plays at a good pad level at times, and he's able to be explosive off the line, can really make havoc as a run defender. You just didn't see it this year with the Florida State Seminoles in their year, but natural pass rusher, natural athlete, good bend agility for his size when he's getting to the quarterback. So again, a guy that could really elevate his stock at the defensive line position.
Randall, how about you? Where do you have him?
Farmer, I do have him right around the same area, I believe, beginning of the 4th round at DT 13. And I mean, with the Senior Bowl, it kind of opened up my eyes a little bit with those two as well. But then if you're looking at it, Deion Walker's Senior Bowl showed his exact flaws, and that was kind of the kicker at that point. Is he went up against Willie Lampkin, and he got stuffed by Willie Lampkin sitting right there, sort of thing. So like that's just super concerning, and nothing against Willie Lampkin, but Deion Walker should have at least been able to bull rush him. I believe it was back to back that they did it, and he lost both, sort of thing. So that's where that flaw comes in, and that's where Darius Alexander bull rushed a bunch of times on those one-on-ones, and he just powered through them, and it was great to see. So that's the difference in that Senior Bowl for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's a couple guys from Texas who probably have more traits than their tape would indicate that's where they should be drafted, and I'm referring to Isaiah Bond and Cam Williams. So, Randall, is there either one of those players you'd want to start talking about, like where they are on your board and why they're that high?
Yeah, for sure. So Isaiah Bond, I'm pretty low on at the moment, to be honest with you, and I think that he might have one of the biggest opportunities for to actually get back into where he was pre this season, to get back into it based on his 40. And what's going to be super intriguing is that you have Isaiah Bond and Tez Johnson, both super quick, pretty much battling for who's going to have the best 40, right? Both wide receivers, similar, 5'11", 182. Tez Johnson, 5'9", 156. Both kind of similar styles, even though Tez is maybe a little more field stretcher, while Isaiah Bond is a really good route runner and can hit in that intermediate sort of thing. But Isaiah Bond kind of lost his confidence with his injury this year, and then he ended up trying to come back, but you could tell that confidence, especially in the game where he double clutched the ball while jumping, sort of thing. You could see that confidence dropping him. But with that being said, he probably should run, my guess is like a 4.26, 4.25, I'm thinking. And that will kind of reevaluate the tape and who wants to take a chance on there. Especially with Tez Johnson, is 156 pounds stands out. So are you looking at maybe a 4.25 guy that's 182 and will be a little bit more durable or things along those lines, and seeing that kind of area? But combine for him, running the gauntlet and the 40 will do great things for Isaiah Bond come this offseason. Josh, what do you think?
I think that we've all really have given Isaiah Bond a hard time during this last half of the season, because during October, getting into November, we were all super high on Isaiah Bond. We were looking at the top 3 wide receivers in this class, and Isaiah Bond was starting to creep up there with those traits. You saw it at Alabama. You saw it at the beginning of the year with Texas. It's not just speed and obvious deep threat ability. He showed some nuance at the stem of those routes when he's working in the end zone, working in the goal line, able to make people miss yards after catch with that speed, absolute agility. But like you said, the injury back half this year really substantially took down his play. So if you're talking about anybody who has to host a game, he's going to light it up on the 40-yard dash no matter what. I understand it's the combine, can't put that much stock into it, but there's actual game tape that backs up what he's going to show at the combine. It's just you didn't see it in the last 6 to 8 weeks for the season for Texas, but you also saw guys like Matthew Golden, Gunnar Helm, the whole 9 yards, Jaden Blue, even, for example, really elevate their stock. And they didn't need Isaiah Bond as much as they did. And like you said with Tez Johnson, another guy we were super high on during the season, and his tape is absolutely phenomenal. I was a huge Tank Dell guy coming out, even though I believe Tank Dell ran more clean. Chris Browse was able to break off stuff to the pylon, to the corner better than Tez. But Tez is absolutely explosive after the catch, can sit down in the short to intermediate range, has obvious deep threat ability, can line up perfectly in the slot. But because of that 156 pounds, everybody during the last back half of the month has started lowered him down their boards, even though the tail of the tape is he's a really good slot wide receiver, even at that stature. So if he goes out at the combine, runs a 4.33, something like that, does really good in the 3 cone, the whole 9 yards, shows he's really agile, it's not going to be a question on the toughness, the whole 9 yards. They're going to get into the interviews with Tez Johnson and really go and thoroughly evaluate him from there. But he's a really good football player, and he'll just reedify that at the Scouting Combine as well. Another guy to keep your eye on is Ty Felton as well, a guy that's getting lost in the mix just because of all the risers coming up like Jack Besh, Savion Williams, etc. Tez Johnson's Ty Felton's kind of falling down that board a little bit. If he's having a strong combine showing, I think people are going to get back on the Ty Felton train and really start to elevate them in their top 64.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Ty Felton's not in that 64 still. I feel like at least people who've been watching him should keep him in. I believe he's right at that end of second round for me on those wide receivers because he's super clean, super high floor, to be honest with you. All his traits, and he has everything down packed in his route running, his vision, how he operates on the outside and things along those lines. So it's all there for him. But you're right. People just keep coming up and kind of he's getting lost in that translation. But his first half of the year was lights out, and he drifted off just a little bit. But that drifting off doesn't mean anything for his NFL play, in my personal opinion.
Right. And one more guy before we get off the receivers, if you haven't already noticed him, you will get introduced to him in the last week of February, is Savion Williams out of TCU. We've been on him for a while. Super fun player to evaluate, super high projectability. You actually can do so much with him on the field of football. It's just if he's actually going to be a consistent receiver. But at the combine, we're not testing those things. He's going to catch passes from the quarterbacks, of course. But a guy his size, his stature, NFL teams are going to see how strong he is, and see how quick and agile he moves. It'll be interesting to see what his 40 is. But God, Savion Williams will introduce himself to the masses at the scouting combine.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the 3-cone and the 3-cone and the 40 will be interesting because, he doesn't need to run a 4.4. Maybe a low 4.4 would be skyrocket sort of thing. That would be incredible. But he's insane. He was on Bruce Feldman's list as a freak athlete for running, weightlifting, and word on the street was in high school he threw the ball 80 yards. So not only is TCU using him in the pass game and as a running back, you could technically use him as a quarterback, as he played quarterback in high school as well, and he's got an arm on him. TCU figuring out him as a running back late in the season this year was probably a service to him instead of a disservice, because then it opened up the eyes for scouts and everybody to see sort of what he could be. So Savion, he's my wide receiver 9, I believe, in the top 64, strictly because of ceiling. And some of that ceiling is because they used him in the run game sort of late in it. So then it was here's another opportunity that he could do. And now he's getting compared to Cordarrelle Patterson and things along those lines. And that's a great thing because Cordarrelle Patterson in his prime was incredible. So pair that up with what is needed in the modern NFL, I think is exactly what people are looking for. Debo's asking for a trade. Why not draft Savion, right?
Right.
So Savion Williams is interesting because, again, another player where there's likely traits, but from a receiving, if we were just scouting him as a wide receiver, he's probably a little bit further down. It's seeing him used more as a gadget player is what moved him up, right?
And
absolutely.
It's very weird because this isn't a small receiver we're talking about. This is a big body receiver that has really good traits at the receiver position. He can make really good contested catches. He's athletic. He's speedy yards after the catch. It's going to be kind of like Xavier Legette, like you alluded to in the comments, Jim. His rise, his senior year, he starts creeping up into high top 50 conversations. Different players. Legette had different strengths, both really good athletes. Legette was the more complete receiver by all accounts, but Savion Williams is very, very interesting with what you can do with him on the football field. Concentration drops and overall route running ability are going to be the biggest things he's going to need coached up. But give him a year or two, like Legette kind of needed this year, and you're going to be a guy that's absolutely going to be pivotal to someone's offense.
Yeah, and then a side thing that I believe the NFL needs to teach him is kind of how to use his frame. I feel like he's not using all of 6'5", 225. His contested catches are good. He shows that in his 6'5" frame, but he uses a lot of forced missed tackles. In the run game, he has 22 missed forced tackles. In the receiving game, he has 18 forced missed tackles. You kind of almost hope that he wasn't as agile and just kind of burning through people. Right. Sometimes take the hit, take the contact and go sort of thing. He kind of evades the contact a lot, which is not a bad thing, but also you're 6'5", 225, right? You take that cornerback, put him down and run straight. Go vertical, don't go horizontal, right? So, but those three things, I think it's very plausible that put him in the right situation. you picked him at the right spot.
So between Savion Williams, Tez Johnson, Isaiah Bond, and Ty Felton, are all four of those guys in your top 64, Randall?
No. So right now I don't have Isaiah Bond or Tez Johnson in my top 64. I have Isaiah Bond outside in the mid-third, and then I have Tez Johnson at the end of the third, and then Ty Felton and Savion in my top 64.
How about you, Josh?
So Savion Williams is the only guy that's in my top 64. But again, there's some really underrated receivers in this draft class. Very deep when we're talking about wide receivers 5 through wide receivers 17. All guys below in the top 100, in my opinion. But yeah, Isaiah Bond, Ty Felton, and Tez Johnson are the guys I'm really looking forward to see at the scouting combine because they fall on the lower half of my 15 through 17. Still top 100 prospects. Don't get it wrong by any stretch of the imagination. But start grading with different position groups with the same grading criteria. Some guys get moved up naturally just because other grades or other positions are they give more accountability to like defensive linemen, edges, push them up the board a little bit more and push receivers a little bit down.
Yep. And I respect both of your gradings a lot. And you just both, I think, prove the point about Bond and Tez Johnson because you have them outside your top 64. And there's a really good chance both those guys go in round 2.
Oh, yeah.
Right. There's a really good chance their traits are going to get them drafted much higher than where they are in your board.
And there's
one round.
And there's guys. Those are the guys that, even though we have them graded lower, we won't be mad if they go in the top 64. Like a guy that we would have a 4th or 5th round grade that sneaks his way into the top 64. We're like, okay, that's a little bit of a reach. But no, these are guys absolutely capable of being quality starters in the NFL. So even though they're lower on our boards, top 64 is more than warranted for them, especially in the right scenario.
Definitely. And I do believe it will be interesting to see because you're right about, if you're going wide receiver 6 through 18, it's kind of a pick a flavor sort of thing. What's your style? But also the difference in the amount of X receivers 6'2" and above versus the amount under that, under 6 foot and quick slot receiving is so much less. So if you are looking in that round 2 and you're afraid that he's not going to be available in round 3, you might take him at 40 to 49 just so you can make sure that you have the guy that you want because it's right. Jim, you're probably right in the top 64. It's not surprising that they go. And that's one of the reasons why I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. Okay, so let's jump up to the very top of the draft board. So there's 2 edges. Michael Williams. Well, actually, I guess we're going to have to do 3 because there's Michael Williams, Mike Green, and Shamar Stewart. And those 3 guys are going to be, I don't want to say top 20 locks, but I would put money that all 3 go in the top 20. I don't know how much money I would put on that, but I think that's a bold take, but it's not really that aggressive.
No.
What's getting those guys into the top 20? Mike Green, Shamar Stewart, Michael Williams. And if you don't like them in the top 20, tell us why.
So I'll start. For edge rushers, for me, I guess the scouting combine means little to nothing to me with edge rushers. All I'm looking for at the scouting combine really is measurables. If you have a guy, obviously, like Chop Robinson, who absolutely just lights it up at the scouting combine, you're like, okay, this guy's obviously a very good get-off guy, has ability to bend out on the outside with lining up as a wide 9. Shows it at the scouting combine. You kind of remind yourself that, hey, Chop Robinson isn't just a developmental top 50 pick. No, he can absolutely provide value right away. So those guys outside of the Mike Greens, Michael Williams, Shamar Stewarts of the world could elevate their stock in that way. But for me, I just want to see how those guys stand up and line up next to each other and how they do in interviews from what we hear in our draft spaces. But Michael Williams and Shamar Stewart, for example, guys who have kind of really good measurables. 2 tales of stories. Michael Williams, his hype has diminished a little bit. Shamar Stewart's the hot name on the market right now. Everybody saw what he did at the Senior Bowl. But guys that are really comparable, for me, Michael and Mike Green are the guys that are in the top 20. Shamar Stewart, I think, has the most to gain from the scouting combine, in my opinion. Just the overall production numbers you saw on tape this year. does not match the traits at all. Absolutely awesome run defender, alignment versatility, again, really long arms, can get to the quarterback, good hurries at times, has really good promise to be an all-pro type of player, one of the highest ceiling defensive ends in this class, and he can show that at the scouting combine as well. But Michael Williams, people are going to see his arm length in person, his height, his absolute frank demeanor, his great build. They're going to remind themselves that, hey, even though this might not be a guy with the most elite bend on the outside, this guy has been producing for 3 years at Georgia and absolutely has the size and measurables and physicality and IQ to play high-level defensive end at the next level. And then Mike Green, I don't think he needs to do anything at the scouting combine. For example, you have made your money this year, 17 sacks at Marshall, absolutely showed out at the Senior Bowl. I would not touch that field if I was Mike Green and just move on to the see if he gets in the top 32. That's a guy that's absolutely graded out well for me. Really awesome dip move on the outside, can elevate pad levels like no other in this class. Really nuanced, actually really physical in the run game, despite what people think. So, Shamar Stewart, for me, the guy that has the most to gain from the scouting combine. I don't really put too much stock in the edge rushers, but Shamar Stewart is a guy that can go from being a 20 to 32 pick to really a bona fide top 10 pick with a really good showing.
Really? Yeah. So you think even though you don't typically look for anything significant with edges at the combine, you think Stewart really can move up 10 to 20 spots on the board with a good combine?
If he tests out of this world, just because this is a guy at his size, we don't see move like that. Like Nick Scorton at his size, 6'4", 280, he's going to have good movements for his size. But Shamar Stewart's a inch taller, about 5 pounds heavier with longer arms than Nick Scorton. God, if he just has an amazing combine, myself, who's a little bit of a lower person on Shamar Stewart's going to start to push back the deficiencies I have on him and go, hey, this guy's going to be at worst a really good, awesome run defender at the next level. That's absolutely a starter grade you can take in the top 20. So if he shows that agility, that 3-cone prowess, a good 40, if he moves well in the drills, I might have to move Shamar Stewart up, just like everybody else probably will during this process.
How about you, Randy? Where do you have those three?
Shamar Stewart, I do have still in the lower 20s. I know a lot of people have it in the top 10. I really do think that a lot of GMs are considering in the top 12. Those GMs are like, what about him, right? Like, shoot, let's rewatch the tape. They're watching it now. And I think they are going for the combine in the interview. So I think Josh kind of nailed that, where it's a flavor that they're considering and they just want confirmation. And that's what comes with the interviews and the combines for sure. I do have Michael Williams a little bit later. I have him in like the 15 to 20 range. I do love that his Georgia production basically have almost been identical all 3 years, which is kind of wild. And but his consistency and his length is what I kind of loved at it. I mean, he kind of operated on a second level and a first level. His awareness, how smart he is on the field, being with Georgia 3 years, is incredible, and his length is the best. I mean, going up against every single tackle that I watched him play, he basically gained leverage in the run game every single time. He had the leverage based on his arms, and then he could just rip and go. He would set the edge. It was easy for him. He could get through double teams. I was impressed with him, but 26 pressures, 5 sacks, and not being able to get over the hump, like he did that 2 years ago, and then he did it last year, and I was hoping to see an ascension in production, and it just kind of stayed almost identical. So that's just a little concerning. Kind of what you see is what you get. Is there how big is his ceiling in general, sort of thing? So I'm curious about that. So I have him in the 15 to 20 area. I don't have him in the top 12 for Michael Williams. And then Mike Green, same thing. I'm surprised that some people kind of didn't like his run support. I saw a couple times where he went through double teams and had a tackle for loss. That was super impressive. So I agree with Mike Green as well. I think when he walked off the Senior Bowl and didn't participate in the last practice in the game, he pretty much solidified that somebody probably told him that he was a first-round pick and was like, okay, I'm out of here, sort of thing, and kind of called it. But I have Mike Green probably right about in the same as Michael Williams and Mike Green, that 15 to 20 area, and I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think he'll ever get up into the top 10 just because most of his season was agility and elusiveness, and he did do the power in the Senior Bowl, but that's really not to be proven just on a one-on-one. I'd like to see that bull rush a little bit more. So I don't think he would be top 10, but I do have him in the teens for sure.
And then let me just give you a couple more names for the edge rusher group that need to be talked about at the scouting combine that could really remind scouts and NFL personnel how good and how tradesy of an athlete they are. First off, we'll start with Josiah Stewart, the edge rusher out of Michigan. Didn't really show much at the Senior Bowl. At the first day of practice, sat out with an injury, wasn't as dominant as his peers, but an absolutely borderline elite speed rusher on the outside, has really good agility for his size, has really good strength for his size, can hold up the edge. His concern is going to be his height and run defense at the next level. Probably one of the fastest guys that you're going to see at the scouting combine. Jordan Birch, the edge rusher defensive lineman out of Oregon. Not only does he have the size, 6'4", 294 pounds, can line up as a true edge rusher, win with speed to power, finesse, play good run defense, can line up on the defensive line. But if you saw some of his special team snaps this year, he took fakes as a punter and absolutely was dynamic as a runner with the ball in his hands for somebody that's 290 pounds. So going to absolutely make a mark for himself at the scouting combine. Donovan Ezerako, the edge rusher out of Boston College, absolutely is going to be a mainstay at the combine again. Everybody knows who he is. Absolutely amazing production this year for Boston College, but they're going to see the arm length. And again, one of them are going to be one of the guys to test one of the fastest times at the 40 for an edge rusher. So could have that Chop Robinson level of rise for us in draft media. I know a lot of mock drafts have him at the fringe top 32, hanging in the top 40, drafting in the first 40 picks, but a guy that could see himself rise into the top 32 with an amazing combine. And then one more down here, a little under the radar guy, Camion Rucker, the edge rusher out of North Carolina, if he participates. Another undersized edge rusher. Teams are going to deter to day 3 just because of the size, but absolutely amazing production the last 2 years. High IQ football player, can win with speed, finesse, agility, can have power at the point of attack. A guy that if he shows well in the 3-cone, runs a decent 40 and does really good in all the movement drills that they do with the edge rushers, could really get a lot of love that he deserves from the NFL draft community.
Yeah, no, that's great. And if I could add one more person, it'd be Landon Jackson. Mm-hmm. And with those combines, which is interesting because, Landon Jackson, 6'6", 273, has like an 83-inch wingspan sort of thing. But these tall guys, because we have a lot of big edges and defensive tackles, is the run the hoop in the combine. Chop Robinson basically raised his stock like crazy on his run the hoop drill in the combine. But Landon Jackson's not major flaw, because his major flaw is the high pad level, is that he's not that bendy. And when he tries to use his bend, he actually loses his feet. Happened twice in the Senior Bowl, happened a lot against Texas and things along those lines. But he feels like he could get past them with his power. But if he has to take a second angle at it, he'll sweep his feet right under. So run the hoop for Landon Jackson, I think, is huge for NFL GMs to see. If he can complete that in a quick manner, that'd be great. But Landon Jackson, his spatial awareness is in there. He's awkward and lateral on stunts and things along those lines. His run support is really good. He does get to the QB a lot, 7 sacks, 8 QB hits. I'll take that with 9.5 tackles for loss. So he's in that backfield a lot. But his Senior Bowl was horrendous. I mean, in my opinion, it dropped my stock, and I live 5 minutes away from the Razorback Stadium. So I'm one of his biggest supporters. But I would like to see him make a comeback from the Senior Bowl to the combine, show what he's worth, and maybe get his stock back on that.
So a couple players, as I'm looking at the traits guys, who might do really well at the combine. Femi Oludajo, is that UCLA?
Yeah, yep. That's the edge rusher from UCLA.
And then is it David
Van?
I was thinking David Van is the Feldman freak. I was thinking of the linebacker turned edge. Is it David Walker?
Yeah. Central Arkansas?
Yes.
Yeah.
So like David Walker, Femi Oludajo, edges, those guys should also be testing quite well at the combine, right?
Well, yeah, definitely. Femi Oludajo had a really good Senior Bowl as well, if I'm not mistaken. He had some shining moments for sure. And he's got a good size. I mean, he's a little short, but 261 at that. Got long arms, almost 33 and a half. Got a good wingspan and things along those lines. And it's intriguing to see what his athleticism will be at the combine because they use him in a hybrid role, kind of outside linebacker, edge, pulls back sort of thing. UCLA will show 4. He might pull back pre-snap while somebody comes forward. So those stunts that they use is super interesting as that pass rusher. The simulated pressures he does really well. He's very smart. He has a pass rush. He has 3 to 4 pass rush moves, so I really like that. I think that he has a lot to gain at the combine just to put eyes on him, and then the conversations with the GM will help him a lot too.
And where is he on your board right now?
He is right in that edge. So beginning around 4 for me. So I believe it's edge 13 or 14, but beginning around, I have like first 5 picks of day 3.
Okay. And Josh, where do you have Femi Oludaja?
So a guy that lower on coming into the Senior Bowl, saw the competitiveness, saw the length, saw the pass rush ability at the Senior Bowl, went back at the tape. When you were saying Oladejo and David Walker, those are going to be the tale of 2 tapes. Like you said, I'm right with Randall. I have Oladejo in that top of round 4, but a guy that can absolutely play himself into a top 100 and will most likely at the end of the day be a top 100 pick when it's all said and done. Edge 18 for me. Doesn't have the experience as an edge rusher, but a guy that's so projectable when you're looking at the arm length, athletic ability. I think he's a good athlete. I think he's going to show that at the scouting combine. I mean, really excited to see that. High toughness guy, versatile, can play off-ball linebacker if you need him to. Speed to power's there. Use of hands is there at times. Going to be a good run defender just because of that size, length, hold up the edge, smart from the linebacker position. Just see how quickly he turns it into the pros. We saw it yesterday with Jalen Hunt, a guy transitioned from safety moving down to edge rusher. And boy, ask anybody that's even Jalen Hunt's biggest supporter in the world. They did not think that Jalen Hunt would be producing right now at this level. Year 1. So
as Buffalo fans, I'm sitting at Javon Solomon wishing I had Jalen Hunt.
Yeah, and I was thinking the same thing. Like, did we have a choice? Did we have a choice between Hunt and Solomon?
We did. Solomon went before him, if I'm not mistaken. I'm like almost positive.
Yeah, so a guy that you can compare like that I really love the traits that he brings. Just see when he's able to put it all together. He's still young and nuanced, so you're going to have to give him a little bit of time to get adjusted to the NFL game. But David Walker, a little scared that he's not going to test the best at the scouting combine just because he's on the shorter side. He's going to have decent, good speed, but he's not going to be the most athletic guy in the world. But I do not care. That's a guy, if he can do whatever he wants at the combine. I'm going back to the tape with David Walker, and I love everything that he produces on tape for the past 3 years. Talk about production on production. This guy absolutely brought it, one of the highest graded PFF players the last 2 years for Central Arkansas, brought the same level of play against higher competition, can do it in the run game, can win in multiple ways in the pass game. Really good power for his size, can win with speed, can win with finesse, win inside, outside, use of hands. A guy that I really think could be a 3-down player in the NFL, even though he's at that shorter side for an edge rusher. And I hope other NFL GMs and scouts see that as well in David Walker, just because he's a Central Arkansas guy. It's a really good deep edge rusher class, and he's not the tallest, most freakiest athletic guy in the world. He's naturally going to fall, but he's probably one of the top 12 edge rushers in this draft class, in my opinion, and that's saying a lot for this edge rusher group. This is a really, really stacked edge rusher group. You're going to see close to 18, 19 get picked in the top 100.
Yeah, I remember when we did linebacker scouting reports because Walker was on the list. And then you and Jake came back and said he's on the wrong list.
Yeah.
He needs to be an edge. Cool. So, Randall, where do you have Walker?
I have Walker in a little bit later based on Central Arkansas and his height sort of thing. It's going to be annoying to see his RAS score because I do think he's going to test out very well, but then his height is going to kind of almost like just counteract it, which will be super annoying. So it's like almost if you take out the measurables and put in just the testing, it's going to be through the roof sort of thing. So I have him in the mid to late 4th round because that's where I think he'll fall. And that I've kind of made my board in that area to where I think he will fall because he's kind of a tough subject, being Central Arkansas, not many people coming out of that Central Arkansas. So I have him in that late 4th.
Is that where you have him, Josh?
No. So a guy that I was extremely high on during the season Guy that I lowered his grade on just so I could temper expectations, take into consideration level of competition, his height, his athletic ability. But a guy that's in my top 64 is going to be a little challenging to consensus. But if I was willing to plant a flag on a guy, David Walker would be a guy I would absolutely plant a flag for.
Okay. Yeah, I think
All
I
right.
remember this. I think we've had this conversation before.
Mm-hmm.
I'm having deja vu. So yeah, because I'm now flashing back to like I'm now remembering you and Jake covering him, and you were like, okay, that was a guy that you liked. I'm remembering that now.
Yeah, liked him since the beginning, going through summer scouting. Just really fun. Turn on the tape. It's really fun tape.
So another interesting player where there's a lot of traits. We don't necessarily have a lot of games is Cam Williams, the offensive tackle from Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So if memory serves me correctly, this is his first year starting at Texas. So there wasn't a lot of 23 tape. Mm-hmm. Most of what we have on him comes from this season. So Josh, you want to tell everybody about Cam Williams and kind of what your summary is and where he is on your board?
Yeah, so if you guys remember last year's draft cycle, Marius Mims was the guy of hot topic, hot conversation, been injured in and out, has the size, has the measurables, played at a prestigious school, had good level of competition and good tape to show for it. Wasn't the most consistent in the world, but you look at his measurables, his athletic ability to play the right tackle position, and you're like, all right, based on that alone, he's a top 32 guy. Now, this year for Texas, started off really strong throughout the year, started to taper off as seasons started getting longer, played against higher level of competition. And you saw in the playoffs, he wasn't really there yet as a full-time starting tackle. He just lacks the overall foot quickness at times, just overall mental processing, being able to hold at the point of attack on a down-to-down consistency. But when you're projecting a guy again, get this guy under, let's just say, even though it's not going to happen, the Eagles offensive coordinator in their scheme, give it 2 years, that guy is going to be absolutely a quality starter, a guy that can contend for the Pro Bowl every year. A guy you're going to have to really project in the right scheme, get him under the right coaching staff, kind of like a mold of clay, in my opinion, for Cam Williams. Not as polished as Marius Mims coming out, could go in the top 32. But if you click the right buttons and start to get him triggering, he absolutely has all the traits in the world to be a well-rounded right tackle in the run and pass game. Still young, still has time to develop. A guy that I'm lower on, and I'm lower on this tackle class in general. But with a low tackle class, you're going to see guys start getting picked higher than where their grades suggest they should go, just because of how important the tackle position is in the NFL. So is it last year's draft class? No. But Cam Williams, when you're talking about traits and projectability, is absolutely one of the guys you have to get excited talking about.
Oh, yeah.
How do you have him, Josh?
So right now he is in my third round. So he's hanging in that 75 to 85 range, which is low for me. But going through these tackles in this draft class, we'll see it in my upcoming rankings. I'm lower on this draft class compared to consensus.
Yeah, I had actually Cam Williams. Honestly, I have it right in my notes that he's a ball of clay. So you pretty much verbatim at that point. And when I see kind of a ball of clay when I was watching, he does have up and down. I'm curious to see where GMs are going to take him in that ball of clay, because I do believe that it will take more than a season for him to get ready for the NFL, because he kind of goes hot and cold. And it's watching the tape to pick out which ones. Like Texas, he had a good game going up against Jalen Walker, Michael Williams, and things along those lines. But then he had a really bad Ohio State game, right? And I feel like some of those bad games, he just kind of gets caught in his own quicksand. And it could be literal and figural, because sometimes his feet look like they're caught in quicksand, as well as he just kind of doesn't let himself try to catch up and recover. And he just continues on a bad game. So, I mean, allowed 26 pressures, 5 sacks, and 3 QB hits. Definitely was better in the run game. I do think that I believe only playing about 85 snaps in 2023 was a little bit of a detriment. So he needs to have that extra year to kind of learn. So I have him late in the round 3, 85 to 95. But with that ball play, I think he has an opportunity to be amazing. Put him in the Bengals, you're right, Bills, Eagles sort of thing, and help that run game. I think will work well for him. But I don't think a GM would take a shot at a non-starter for potentially 20 games, 23 games at the end of round 3.
Right, and it's going to be really interesting to see because when you start going through this offensive line class in general, even the guys that we have sticking at tackles on our big board, you can make an argument for a lot of them to go to guard. For me, I have graded guards that have played tackle and could play tackle: Donovan Jackson, Greg Zabel, Marcus and Bell, Wyatt Milam, Will Campbell, Jonas Salvanea, Miles Frazier. You can go down the whole 9 yards, and you start going through the tackles. Amar Membu could flex out the guard if you need him to. Kelvin Banks can flex in the guard if you need him to. Emory Jones can flex in the guard if you need him to. So if you're talking about pure tackles, you only got Josh Simmons, Ariante Ursary, Josh Connerly, Ozzie Tropilo, and then Cam Williams. And if you're talking about size measurables, the whole 9 yards, if you start seeing those guys get into the top 32 and just get off the board, a team that needs a tackle, left or right tackle, is going to go up and reach for Cam Williams just because of everything he brings, and he's going to play true tackle at the next level.
So it's interesting, Josh, because you just gave the preview for one of our podcasts tomorrow. So our podcast late tomorrow night is going to be tackles. Not the word guard will not be mentioned in the entire podcast.
True tackles.
Good luck.
So it's only players that will measure and meet whatever the length and body type for tackle. If they're a tweener, that's a different podcast.
Yeah.
We're going to cover just tackles. To basically point out, like you said, like there are some other guys that would be like late day 3. I think, what was it? Is it Jalen Travis?
Jalen Travis, tackle out of Iowa State. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a few other gems that a few draft professors cooked up. So, and the 2 podcasters working on it may have even dug up more that I don't know about yet. But Randall, where do you have Cam Williams?
I have Cam Williams in about 85 to 95 range, so end of round 3 for me.
Okay, and Josh, is it similar for you?
Same thing, but he's right there with me with Ozzie Tropilo, Emory Jones, hanging in that 85 to 100 range of tackles that I would absolutely be more than happy taking on day 2.
Yep. So, Randall, remember where you said, like, would a GM draft a tackle that can't play immediately in round 2?
Yes.
Yeah, so you're forgetting Doug Whaley.
Oh, yeah, of course I am. I Men in Black like half of our drought. You know that, right?
Yeah. So my opinion is that a team is likely going to take a Tracy offensive tackle in round 2.
Yeah.
Because you're not expecting him to start immediately, but the position is so important. So
yeah, I get that. There's been a lot of bad offensive line play. So I do understand that, like just as Josh said, is if everybody's kind of getting out, like people are drafting, then you got to reach sort of thing. But it's still, there's a decent amount of teams that need starters. So free agency will be super important when it comes to the offensive line. And then, if you need multiple offensive linemen, start at the free agency, and then we're going to kind of be able to dictate more where offensive line will go, in my opinion.
And we're talking about, just real quick, we're talking about Tropilo, Emory Jones, Cam Williams, the guy we've been mainly talking about, hanging in that end of round 3, barely top 100. But this is not like ordinary draft classes. This is really good depth in rounds 2, 3, 4, following into those rounds. So even though they're falling into the bottom round 3, bottom of top 100, these are guys that we would absolutely be happy to see them go earlier if they need to, because they have really good upside, really good projectability. And just because other position groups are really deep this year and they push other guys down the board doesn't mean that these guys are bad prospects that by any means. It's not like taking Dennis Daly in the 3rd, 4th round and having him start and giving up as many pressures and sacks that he's done. These guys will absolutely be serviceable if they need to start right away, but love to see them sit. And
you're right. I shouldn't be.
Oh, yeah.
I shouldn't be degrading or demeaning the fact that you have a 3rd round grade on somebody that's going to go in round 2. Mm-hmm. You're right. I shouldn't be making it sound like that's evil. That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, I mean the top 125 is exciting in this class, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even past that too, but
right.
I think depth, it goes almost to 125.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking at the list. We've covered Landon Jackson, Michael Williams, Deontay Walker. So Siobhan Ravel, is he going to be drafted high because of traits, or is there actually film to back it up? Like, I think that there's enough on film to justify the round one hype.
I would say
Yeah.
so. It will be interesting to see if he participates at the combine. Didn't participate at the Shrine Bowl. I don't think he's going to participate at the combine. A guy we've barely been able to get film on, East Carolina cat, got injured at the beginning of this year. But with the clips and some game tape that we have saw, the tape is warranted. That guy, even though measured in under 6'2", long, tall, freaky, athletic, can run on any part of the field, can cover with anybody in man to zone coverage, has the long arms to play ball skills. Really a true gem that got found early in summer scouting. And even though there's been a lot of risers in this defensive back position, he's been a guy that's dropped down the hype a little bit. But talk about traits at the cornerback position. Him and Azariah Thomas, 1-2, are the guy, and Darian Porter, those guys, traits for days when you're talking about cornerback position. They'll get drafted high.
Oh yeah, it was 32 over 32 and a half arms, and then almost an 80-inch wingspan for a cornerback at 6'1" and a half is insane. And 190 is a good weight. He had 46 solo tackles with 9 defensive stops as a cornerback, which is insane. Only allowing 250 yards that year, 1 touchdown, 10 pass breakups, which is nuts. Obviously, with 80-inch wingspan and 33 and a half inch arms, pass breakups make sense for him. Yeah, the injury's rough. The tape that I got to see matches it, but I almost don't think that he should really do much at the combine, to be honest with you. I think people are prepared. I mean, I know a lot of people aren't talking about him now, sort of thing, just because he hasn't played this year. But I think the deep scouts and the NFL scouts know who he is, sort of thing, and combine interviews will be good.
So, Owen, thank you for stopping by.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Janae Barron, even though he might not test out of this world, will test well in all categories. But if you haven't gotten to watch Janae Barron's tape, please go watch it. A guy that I'm really high on, have him inside my top 15 prospects, can line up on any position that you want, safety, nickel, corner. I think he's the best at nickel at the next level, but not just a quality starter day one, a high impact starter that can impact in the run game, can cover with anybody in man to zone coverage, high IQ player. He's not Trent McDuffie, but a guy that is similar in the way that he plays to Trent McDuffie.
Yeah, for sure. And Io Manor, the other person that was brought up in that conversation, is a really good one too, because I know that the draft professors are pretty high on him, and I'm not sure what the national consensus is on him, but we're in that first round grade for Io Manor, and I'm not sure if everybody has that, but his contested catch ability, his vertical threat, everything along those lines is fantastic. Stanford didn't do him any favors, so that's probably why the consensus is a little bit lower on him. But
I think
if he runs a good 40,
I think you and Bill might be higher on him. When Josh, Owen, and Newt did their wide receiver episode, I don't think any of you had Io Manor in your top 5.
No, but let me explain. He is he's still a top 40 prospect for me. Now, it's going to be really tough. You got Abuka, McMillan, Burden, obviously higher for me. Golden has established himself as just a slight tier higher than Io Manor, just on the last half of production. If you're talking about traits, what are you looking for? You can absolutely make the argument for either or of those guys.
For sure.
Io Manor being above in some guys' rankings, but for me, it's pick or choose between Jack Besh and Io Manor for me in that wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7 range. You go on a guy that's physical after the catch, can really do all the dirty stuff, run blocking, just a guy you love to root for. Go Jack Besh. You want a prototypical X receiver, can make spectacular catches, beat man coverage, good athletic ability, sneaky, strong after the catch. You take Io Manor. But no matter what, even if those guys aren't elite wide receivers at the next level, like we saw with Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors, they're absolutely going to be good starters and guys that stick around for multiple contracts in the NFL. So Jack Besh, Alec Io Manor, guys both inside my top 50 that I'm really excited to see where they go.
Yeah, other than me having, other than having Io Manor a little bit higher than Josh, I know this is poor podcast content, but that's like exactly how I feel about those two. It is. It's prototypical outside Io Manor, contested catch, like does great on that, is elusive and quick. that can create that separation. Jack Besh is power slot or a slash X receiver that is good at the blocking, good route running at the stem to create separation. So who do you want, sort of thing? You're not going to lose. Take your pick.
And these aren't going to be guys who test out of this world at the combine. So if you
Jack
start seeing Isaiah Bond start creeping his way up in the top 5 conversation again, and guys like Io Man or Jack Besh, Jaden Higgins, Xavier Restrepo start falling down the board for guys that test amazing at the combine, don't forget that the combine does not mean the end all be all. We saw what John Ross did at the combine, moved himself into a top 10 just because he ran an amazing 40. And 10 years later, Xavier Worthy is what John Ross everybody thought he was going to be. So it's a give or shoot, crab shoot with the combine. Go back to the tape with wide receivers, I would say. Game speed and 40 speed are 2 different things, in my opinion.
100%.
Worthy, for example. But those guys, even though they might not test out of the world, keep them high on your boards.
So, Randall, what time would Io Manor have to run in a 40 for you to say he's not getting out of round 1?
High 4.4s for his size. That would be probably a 4.46, 4.47. If he could run that at his height, then would be a lock for a first rounder. But I mean, I would still accept a 4.55.
Yeah.
For round 1, Io Manor?
It'll be interesting to see if he goes round 1, just because for a fact they're certain wherever you have your receivers ranked, you got Burden ahead, you got McMillan, you got Ibuka, who will most likely go ahead, and then you start having the arguments, and then you start going on the other positions. They're going to creep their way in the top 32, so naturally players are going to fall out. But Io Manor, for me, if he runs a 4 or 5 even, I will be ecstatic to see that, and then you can start going, oh, he might have a little more burst in the tank. I want to see this 10-yard split. For example, I want to see how fast he's able to get off that line. That's the thing I look at more than 40 times with receivers is their 10-yard split. How fast are they able to get off the line of scrimmage, explode into their top speed? Kind of like a guy like CeeDee Lamb, really explosive in those first 10 yards, and then he's kind of on glide mode to finish it off. Different types of receivers, but if Io Manor runs a 4 or 5 even, in my opinion, you could start seeing him start to creep his way in the top 32. But if he runs a 4 or 4, it'll be close, but people are going to start shoving him in there.
I definitely do prioritize the 10-yard
Williams
split
at the beginning. So Owen was mentioning Savion Williams, like he missed, like the, he had to be here 55 minutes ago. I think that was how we opened up the show.
We did.
Yeah, let's pause and let's go for a quick commercial. So, Josh, you want to tell everybody who you are, how they can find you?
Right. So my name is Josh Townsend. You can follow me at juice_T23. I'm going to be on here every Monday while I'm battling work schedule, trying to fill out grades myself. We'll be on here every Monday talking about everything you need to know about this NFL draft cycle. We've got over 150 players graded so far. Big board will be coming out in the next couple of days. Be sure to stay tuned for that because there are going to be some controversial takes on there that a lot of people aren't going to like. So I'm going to have to put a disclaimer before I put anything out. Make sure to follow Randall on Twitter at Randall Cypher. Make sure to follow NFL Draft Fanatic on Twitter for Everyday Draft Day podcast. And make sure to follow Scout's Eye View on Twitter as well. Starting to get that up and going again. Super Bowl just ended, so Luke Chenard, the guy who runs it, just got done everything he needs to do for ESPN. So full attention is going to go into that, and you're going to get awesome content from us at Scout's Eye View. NFL Scout on Instagram is also participating in our internship. So you're going to see a lot of content on Instagram from us, and just stay tuned for everything you need to know for the NFL draft here at the NFL Draft Fanatic.
Cool. Randall.
Yeah, but at Randall Cypher on Twitter and Blue Sky is where you can find me. I'm doing all my draft content at Draft Professors on Tuesdays at the moment. And then obviously we do 32 GM mocks on Fridays that are a lot of fun. If you are in this chat and you want to draft for a team, go ahead and do that for sure. But I will be finally releasing top 50, top 100, top 150 rankings. My goal was to only do 2, a 1.0 and a 2.0. So right about now is where this is going to hit. I'll start sending out my positional rankings as well, but you can always just find me on Twitter, Blue Sky, and here.
Okay. Well, as they've stated before, you can follow the channel at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. We have daily draft content hitting Twitter and YouTube. This is our second podcast today. There's 2 more tomorrow. Tomorrow you'll see Randall doing interior defensive line with Cole Jackson. So guest with Cole. Then we have a late offensive tackle episode. We got more content coming at you, 2 podcasts on Wednesday. We got 2 more on Thursday. And most Fridays, it's a 32 GM mock. Check the pinned tweet on X for at NFL Draft Fanatic to sign up. Because you can put it in the chat, and I'll forget it as soon as the podcast ends. Put it on the pinned tweet. With that being said, let's kind of pivot back. And Randall, how does the scouting combine help you change rankings on players?
Not much overall, to be honest with you. Realistically, their tape is what's most important, measurables, and then like gap, Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, gap, then combine sort of thing. It's kind of just confirming, making sure they're healthy. I mean, there's a couple drills that I like. Again, as we talked about edges, I really like run the hoop, gauntlet for wide receivers and stuff like that. There's certain drills that are telling for them, but realistically, I don't put too much stock into the combine.
No, when you're talking about the combine, the top 50 players, for example, you know who they are already. You know their strengths and weaknesses. Yes, they can elevate themselves a little bit, like Xavier Worthy, Fringe 50 guy, moves himself in the 32nd spot. Chop Robinson moves himself into a top 20 spot. You can see that happen for a couple players, but for me, it's more about the day 3 guys. See who really pops out with size, measurables, athletic ability, leaping ability, how they do in drills. Kind of guys that, even though they might have not the most consistent tape, guys that I can kind of pick out as sort of my guys that I think can project well at the next level given a year or two. Guy you should keep your eye on, for example, is Marcus Yarns, running back out of Delaware, a guy that I've been a little homer on. You've seen at the Senior Bowl, but a guy that has legit track speed, good agility, one of those lower FCS prospects that can really make his way into really not leaving round 5, maybe not even round 4 if he tests out of this world. So guys like that who are sitting somewhere in the middle of day 3 can elevate themselves into beginning of day 3 or even end of day 2 with an amazing combine. But they do the combine for show. They do the combine for the attendance to viewers, but the combine is really for the interviews NFL teams are going to be having with all the players behind closed doors that we have no access to. So we're just fans of spectacles, and we're going to go pick out some of our day 3 guys that we like at the combine.
Yeah, we get it post-draft, right? In the war room and things like that.
Yeah. So, Randall, how do you use the combine? Or did I already ask you that?
You already asked. Yeah. It's kind of the same. Josh hit the nail on the head with the day 3. Day 3 is definitely the most important when it comes down to it. And, just one drill per is what I kind of like run the hoop with edge. I like to see cornerbacks vertical, things along those lines.
Okay. So Daniel Jeremiah had a really good podcast it's like 10 days old. And he was explaining the entire scouting process. Mm-hmm. And I learned a little bit because he was talking about like how certain drills can measure the explosiveness for certain positions.
Right.
Like seeing a lineman long jump and high jump is a measure of explosion.
Correct.
Kind of thing. So that part, I thought that was a pretty good podcast. So one of the things that I remember they said on NFL Stock Exchange last year, and I thought this was really good, is they said, don't count speed twice. And that was a Xavier Worthy comment. If your tape grade already had Xavier Worthy as being fast, when he runs a fast combine, you can't move him up because your grade should have already accounted for the speed. So, Josh, you're laughing. Are you laughing because that's true, or are you laughing because I'm full of crap?
I'm laughing because it's a little bit true, but I'm also laughing at the fact that Xavier Worthy, even though the Chiefs got their behinds, last night, the explosiveness you saw with Xavier Worthy in the last 4 minutes of that game, I'm concerned when the Chiefs figure out their offensive tackle and running game scenario because we had concerns about Xavier Worthy's toughness, his tracking ability. We knew he was explosive as end-all, be-all after the catch. Was an amazing RPO threat for the Chiefs. But if we have to deal with post bombs to Xavier Worthy for the next 10 years, I'm going to be a very disgruntled Ravens fan.
All right, I'll counteract that because I do think one of the most important not most important, top 10 defensive plays in the first half was when Patrick Mahomes was going to go for that deep shot. And that was Xavier Worthy, and he had to check it down. And Mahomes wanted that bad in a game that was 10-0 at that point. But Kenyon Mitchell held on him on a one-on-one on that go route, and he held him by himself. No safety help, ran with him the whole way. So I do understand that, and I'd like to just counteract that. He got held up, but Kenyon Mitchell is a top 5 cornerback, so
right.
That's here nor there. But he did hold up against him, I guess. I enjoyed. Sorry, Chiefs fans, I enjoyed yesterday.
So it was a good game from the standpoint of I can't remember the last time a Super Bowl was that much of a blowout. I think somebody said it was when Denver lost to Seattle.
Right, that's where my mind went.
Yep.
And then before that, it was like every Super Bowl when I was growing up.
Right.
Because so the Bills Super Bowl, when they lost to the Giants, was really close.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you look at like the 10 Super Bowls that were before, they weren't that close.
Games, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then all the Super Bowls after that one were blowouts, unfortunately, against Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
But
even
most of the Super Bowls until the recent ones hadn't been close.
Right. And even though this is off topic, we're talking about the scouting combine. We saw yesterday that no matter what, you could have the best quarterback, the best coach, the best defensive coordinator in the world. The reason why NFL is so captivating and we love this shit is because it's a true team game. You need all 11 players on each side of the ball to click and the continuity to be there on a single drive on every single play. Because if you have lackluster production and talent at the tackle position, even though the Chiefs were deflated, if you have a lackluster running attack, put it all on Patrick Mahomes' shoulder and step behind Travis Kelce, you're going to get the results that you got at the Super Bowl. I mean, they held their own as long as they could in the AFC and got themselves into the Super Bowl. But I think it's pretty sure guaranteed we're going to see a tackle or a running back. Probably both get taken by the Chiefs in the top 64.
Yep. And as we're talking, the category of this podcast is traits and measurables do matter. Philadelphia's does nothing but draft big boys for those trenches, and it works. So looking at size and measurables this year, I know GMs are looking at that Super Bowl game being like, yeah, we need big boys up in the front and just pushing people back. And I love how the NFL is now evolving into it's always a chess game, but
right.
Execution won yesterday.
Yeah.
Instead of X's and O's.
And there was a really good podcast we did. Randall, I think you were on it, where we had you, David, Sam Teets, and myself, right? And we were covering how the Eagles built their team.
Right.
And David is a Philadelphia Eagles reporter, and he had great data. He was showing both the amount of money the Eagles put into their lines, the high draft capital that Josh just indicated. There was a lot of good data there. So there's a good chance I'm going to go back and watch that podcast again. But that's a good 1 hour, everybody. Like, just listen to a Philadelphia Eagles draft professor tell us how the Eagles built their team. That episode was really well done. And like I said, Sam Teets came in. And if you want to see Sam again, he's going to be on Thursday's podcast when we do corners. Sam's always a very knowledgeable person. And then we had Randall, David, myself as well, bringing in, everything from free agent trends to draft trends. I thought everybody on that podcast delivered a little bit. It's always just good to have insight from somebody that knows the team.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we've been going here for the better part of 70 minutes. So we are going to shut this thing down for Josh, Randall, the 33 podcasters at the Draft Professor. Thank you very much for watching. We will see you on a podcast again tomorrow. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching this episode of Mrs. R Relevant, the Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. Please follow the Draft Professor on X at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. Please follow the Draft Professor channel on YouTube at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. We look forward to seeing you on our podcast tomorrow.